Time to talk Michigan football here at the Voice of College Football. We would ask that you would like the video, share the videos out on social media, and please subscribe right here. We got Clayton Safey on the line from the Wolverine. Bingo. There you go.
There it
if you want your full Michigan rundown, this thing is packed and loaded. It's the Rivals, the Wolverine edition of the football forecast for 2021, ready for kickoff. And Clayton, thank you so much for sending that to me. I have just started to take the deep dive, and thank you so much for that.
Yeah, 160 pages to go through. So we worked hard on that one. Went to the printer a couple weeks ago and should be at people's houses now if they pre-ordered. And anyone can head to the WolverineOnDemand.com to order right now if they need a copy themselves.
It is beautiful. It is a work of art. I'm telling you, it's a beautiful magazine with some tremendous information. Again, I'm about 5 pages deep, so I'm just getting into it. All right, there are other publications out there. We will get to that in just a second. First and foremost, with the class ranked roughly in the top 10 in the nation, depending on your service, we've got Jacksonville linebacker Micah Pollard as a 4-star, just about ready to commit, we believe, on this fine Monday.
Yeah. So he'll be announcing at 4 p.m. Eastern time, I think on his social media, 3-star linebacker from Jacksonville. And he's listed as an outside linebacker, but Michigan recruiting him as more of an edge rusher. So they want him to play off the edge in this new 3-4 defensive scheme under Mike McDonald. But, you know, they know he has the potential to also play maybe in a more traditional linebacker role as well. So he's got positional flexibility. He's only a 3-star, as we mentioned, but they really like his upside. They really like him. He has some of the bigger schools coming after him as well, especially down in the South. So his offer list, I think, is more impressive than maybe his ranking. A lot of schools want his services, and should be a good addition for Michigan if they're able to do this, if they're able to land him, and it looks like that's the most likely outcome at this point as well. So that's big. They're adding to that edge rusher position, which is huge, obviously, in college football. A couple weeks ago, got Mario Eugenio, 4-star edge rusher from Tampa. So they're hitting Florida hard. They like to recruit the South. They got some connections down there with some of the new assistant coaches, and it looks like they're going to add to that.
Yeah, if Micah Pollard pulls a surprise here on Monday, then it would most likely be Auburn, UCF, or Indiana that he would select. Again, 22 linebacker out of Jacksonville, Micah Pollard, with a bit of a legacy connection to Braylon Edwards, we understand.
Yeah. I think he's his cousin, or, you know, close relative. So that doesn't hurt. Obviously, with Braylon Edwards being a Michigan legend, one of the all-time best wide receivers for the Wolverines, had a pretty good NFL career there for about a decade. It doesn't hurt to be able to call a guy like that up and say, hey, what's it like up there? I mean, I'm from Jacksonville, you know, what's it going to be like if I went there? You got a pretty good, you know, sense of that if you're able to call up Braylon Edwards. So that doesn't hurt Michigan's chances, I feel like, either. He obviously had a great experience here, a great career. So that's just kind of the icing on the top, and maybe, you know, one of those connections to help Michigan get in with a kid like him.
We've got Clayton Safey on the line from the Wolverine on Rivals to break down Michigan football with everything set to explode in just a few weeks. These are the last final few days that are a bit silent, the dog days of summer, at least for weather might be more in the July and August range, but for Big Ten football, of course, it's right about right now, but again, set to explode soon. And before we get to some other news, an off-field analyst coming by way of Baltimore, which, of course, is an obvious connection that we've seen prop up a few times, Clayton.
Yeah, so Biff Poggi, who is a longtime high school head coach in the Baltimore area. He was at Gilman, which is where he really kind of became famous around coaching ranks. He wrote a book about, you know, coaching philosophy and things like that. I actually had a coaching class in college, and we read his book that he co-authored, and it was about the philosophies they were bringing in, you know, kind of servant leadership and things like that. So he is, you know, very well respected in Baltimore and around the country in the high school coaching circles, and actually came to Michigan, as you mentioned. So this isn't the first time that he's been here. He came to Michigan in 2016. His son, Henry, was a fullback on the Michigan roster. He was offered a spot, and he was there before Jim Harbaugh had gotten to Michigan. His son became there. They obviously got to know each other and, connected. Came in as the associate head coach. That's the title he's going to have again. But again, it's an off-field role. He's going to work with the offensive line. He's also going to mentor some of the younger assistant coaches on Michigan staff. I like the move. I love Biff Poggi. He's a good follow on Twitter. He's if anyone, maybe he'll tweet a little bit less now that he's back in the college ranks. But, I followed him for a while, liked his background, and I thought it was a good addition, especially when, Mark, we've talked a few times about this, kind of revamped Michigan assistant coaching staff. There are a lot of young guys on the staff. So to have a guy like him who knows a lot about connecting with kids, coaching, being a guy that's in a mentor type of role, he's definitely going to help in that aspect. He's also going to handle, I believe, some administrative things as well. So Jim Harbaugh continuing even here with just a few weeks until training camp begins, continuing to make some moves. Again, I like this one.
Hey, everyone. We got Clayton Sayfie on the line from the Wolverine on Rivals. Check out his work again on Rivals, thewolverine.com, talking up Michigan football each and every day. And Big Ten Media Days will provide a lot of talk prior to that August camp that Clayton references. Big Ten Media Days, something you're going to attend here?
Yeah, we'll be down in Indianapolis. Usually it's in Chicago, but they moved it down to Lucas Oil Stadium in Indy to, have a little bit more room. You saw them also do that with the Big Ten basketball tournament this past spring, moving it from Chicago to Indianapolis. And it will be lots of storylines. The first time that really we got to talk to Jim Harbaugh and a couple assistant coaches at some of these satellite camps, but the first really organized media setting for Michigan football, probably for a lot of these other schools in person in the last couple of years. So that will be it will be good. It'll be refreshing to see as we get back to normal here. But some top storylines going in. I mean, there's no shortage of them. Quarterback, we don't yet know who's going to be the starting quarterback for Michigan. Caden McNamara was the leader coming out of the spring, but J.J. McCarthy continues to get better from what we've heard. Alan Bowman is now in town from Texas Tech. He's got a few years left of eligibility. He threw for over 5,000 yards at Texas Tech, started double-digit games. So he has the most experience out of any guy in that room. So don't count him out, even though we've heard that he's kind of running third right now in some of these workouts. So the quarterback, that's going to be something to look for. When you look at the offensive line, we kind of know three guys that are going to start. Ryan Hayes probably at left tackle there, Zach Zinter at one of the inside spots, and then Andrew Stuber at either right guard or right tackle. But there's, Zach Zinter could play center. He could play guard. Stuber, like I mentioned, could play guard or tackle. So finding the best five is Michigan's mission on the offensive line. They have a new offensive line coach in Sharon Moore. So storylines like crazy there. And then on the defensive side, you have an entirely new system with Mike McDonald coming in as the coordinator, switching to a 3-4, going away from that famous Don Brown, Dr. Blitz type of stuff. They're still going to be aggressive, as no defensive coordinator would come in and say they're not going to be aggressive, but it's going to be a different type of scheme. You're going to see more zone, and they have a lot to replace on that side of the ball with Kwity Paye gone now. You have Aiden Hutchinson coming back, a preseason All-American, Dax Hill on the back end at safety. So there's going to be a lot to talk about down there in Indy, and I can't wait to, kind of ramp up here. You can almost feel it. It's next week, end of next week. It's on the horizon. You can feel football coming at. And for me, it's always the kind of the unofficial kickoff, in my opinion. Once you get these coaches up at a podium, you get the kids, talking at some of these tables, and you get all the questions and all the media attention on college football. It really feels like the unofficial kickoff of the season.
Yeah, I covered SEC Media Days for 7 consecutive years. I've never been to another. Well, I've been to the American Conference Media Days here about 3 or 4 times in the last few years. And besides that, I now kick back on my couch and try to catch them all at the same time. But yeah, especially for the media, maybe the fans don't quite get it. It's that first dive into, okay, we get to hear some fresh information and hopefully just kind of launch all our storylines as we get ready for August camp. And you named some really good ones, Clayton, but here's one that's going to come up in Big Ten Media Days, SEC Media Days, Big 12 Media, fill in the blank. NIL. It's three letters that college football fans have come to know and love here very recently. It's been the great topic of the offseason, including the proposed college football playoff at 12 teams. So I think everybody's trying to gauge. First and foremost, I think a lot of people have been surprised that July 1st hit and it wasn't this slow process of, okay, athletes would start to get out there and companies would start to contact them. No, these companies, these athletes, they were all set and ready to go. And boom, July 1st hit, and we heard about deals all over the country. But I think every fan base is trying to determine whether their team, their program is going to be able to take advantage or has a unique position in all of this, depending on the conference, where they're located, the brand, the image, all those things in regards to that and their particular players. So where do you think the Michigan slice of this sits in regards to Michigan taking advantage of NIL?
Yeah, so it's crazy. Everyone's saying NIL. I've said NIL more than I ever thought I would say those three letters. I didn't really know exactly what they meant probably even a year ago. You'd always kind of heard, this could happen where, there's been people pushing for it. Then obviously it goes to the Supreme Court, and they basically said that this was, going to be ruled probably at some point illegal, that the NCAA could say some of these kids can't profit off of their own name, image, and likeness. Well, the universities and the NCAA is taking home, millions and billions respectively. So a good move, in my opinion. Obviously, the NCAA didn't go about it probably the right way. They seemed forced into this and reluctantly made this legal. But that's on one side of things. From the Michigan standpoint of things, I think Michigan's positioned really well. They have the largest living alumni base in the country. Obviously a huge brand. They're one of the college football blue bloods. They got to get back to playing on the field like that, but at the same time, they recruit well. They're in on a lot of kids that, they can now continue to pitch that your brand can grow here. Your, image will be bolstered at a place like Michigan because there's a lot of eyeballs on Michigan football. People care about what these kids are doing. People care about the coaching staff. They care about the players. They care about the program overall. So that's one aspect of it is the branding, the fact that you're on a, pretty big platform at Michigan, as opposed to maybe, an Indiana or a Purdue or something like that. Or, not necessarily that you're, competing with a ton of recruits with those guys. But then you look at what Michigan is going to do in terms of how they're going to approach this. You've already seen several schools partner with consultation firms that are going to help out their players. So they're going to kind of bring in some outside help. They're also hiring, their own kind of inside help. They can't make the deals for these kids within the rules, but they can tell a kid, hey, don't rush into this deal. Or a kid can come to them and ask, hey, what do you think about this? Am I signing away too much here? Is this, worth the squeeze on this one? So you can do all of that. And I think Michigan has done a good job. They, before this happened, before July 1, a few months ago, they hired Sydney Sims, who is now the director of branding. So, they were kind of already getting prepared for this. They hired her from Notre Dame, who was in a similar role there. Notre Dame's done a good job with branding as well. So now the next step is, you can kind of help these kids. You can mentor them. You can, you can't find the deals for them. And I think that's probably going to go on at some schools around the country. But now it's kind of on the alums and the fans to kind of band together. And hey, if you're Stephen Ross, who's the owner of the Miami Dolphins, and obviously a huge Michigan booster and graduate, are you going to sign a player to a 6-figure deal to, rep this brand that he owns or that brand? And same with a ton of, more prominent alums around the country and really around the world. If Michigan, and, there's already rumblings about Dax Hill possibly signing a 6-figure deal, the sophomore safety, who's a 5-star and, seems to be like he's going to break out even more this year. If stuff like that happens, Michigan can absolutely sell that on the recruiting trail. They're don't necessarily play by the same rules as some of the SEC powers. But if you can kind of even that playing field, I think even a little bit, it's going to pay off for some of these kids that are considering Michigan, but at the end of the day, decide to stay in the South or decide to go somewhere else. So any little bit helps. I think Michigan is, they didn't announce anything right away with one of these firms or anything, or a marketing agency, but they can catch up really quick here. And I wouldn't even necessarily say catch up, but they can make their plans clear pretty quickly. I think everyone's trying to figure figure this thing out, and we'll see what happens. It's going to be crazy. It already has been, as you mentioned. As soon as you woke up on July 1st, these kids were signing deals.
And you bring up a good point with the consultation, because I'm sure at the stage of life that we're talking about, 17, 18 to 22 years old, that it's reasonable to expect that any money that flows their way, they got to think, hey, that's great. What's the downside? Every deal is going to be great.
Right.
That there's a lot of pitfalls potentially attaching yourself to a certain brand, a certain company, and a lot of legal ramifications that they're not considering. They think that every dollar coming their way is a positive, but that's not necessarily the case.
I wouldn't know what to do either, to be honest.
Exactly.
I mean,
Absolutely.
I would take it probably. I would take the quick cash grab.
Yeah, sure. Oh, send me $100. I can do a social media post in 30 seconds. Everything's good. But that's not, again, necessarily the case. I got Clayton Safety on the line from the Wolverine on Rivals. Again, the Wolverine.com. And, you mentioned a few minutes ago about Michigan being a blue blood and trying to get back to playing that way on the field. And there's much debate as to whether they will get back to playing that way immediately here in 2021. So, of course, all the national publications, the various magazines are out, and people are comparing. And, of course, everybody gravitates to the top 25 and the record predictions. That's the first thing before you take the deep dive is, okay, where do they have my favorite team and the conference race and so forth. So Athlon's 7-5 for Michigan, 5-4 in the Big Ten, number 32 nationally. Lindy's number 6 in the Big Ten, as they ranked all the teams put together, 28th in the nation. Then we've got Phil Steele, who likes the trio of Ball State at 51, Western Michigan at 56, who Michigan's playing, of course, in week 1, and Hawaii at 57, Michigan at 60. Now, my first question would be, okay, it's one thing to rank all the teams based on talent and how good you think they are. And then it's another thing to rank them that way and then say, okay, now we need to apply that to a schedule. So you could be the 30th best team in the country, but you're playing in the Big Ten, so you're playing a tough schedule versus MAC teams. So we're going to drop you from 30 to 50 because your record's not going to look so good.
Yeah.
So you got a chance to talk to Phil Steele, and I spoke or will be speaking with him and have him on the show here this Thursday. So you got some insight into his thoughts about Michigan football for 21.
Yeah, so 60th, I thought seems low, especially with some of the teams in front of them that you mentioned, especially Western Michigan, who, is think early 17.5 point underdog at Michigan on September 4th to open the season. Can't wait for that one. But so that was interesting. And I just looked up quickly while you were talking how many bowl games there are. There are 40, so that means about 80 bowl teams, I guess, in college football. It's crazy that there's 40 of them, but I love all of them, even the ones on like December 17th and things like that. But so yeah, I mean, he has Michigan at 7-5. He has them in a bowl game, obviously. So I guess you could say they'd be in that lower tier, but it still surprises me. And like you mentioned, I think the schedule plays into it because you look at what Michigan has on the field. Like clearly, I think everyone believes they'll probably beat Western Michigan, to use that example again. But, Western Michigan may go 9-3 and win their division in the MAC, and that would probably put them ranked a little bit higher. So you have to take that into account. He has Michigan as playing the 12th hardest schedule in the country. So that's going to be obviously tough with Washington in the non-conference. But, hey, I think that's where the expectations are. You mentioned Athlon having them at 32. I think they're probably, most commonly ranked right now around 25 to 40, anywhere in that range. I've seen them at 25, which surprised some people that they actually, because 25 is that cutoff where it's like, if you're 26, like people are like, okay, whatever. But once it's 25, because for whatever reason, that's, how we've ranked college football forever. People are going to take note of that. So I'm in the camp of the 25-40 right now. I think Michigan has the lowest expectations they've ever had under Jim Harbaugh. And maybe that's good for this team because they've always had super high expectations. They've come in preseason top 10 a few times, and not saying that that's got to them or that's been the reason why they've, and they finished in the top 10 a couple times, but not saying that the preseason expectations have been the reason why they haven't necessarily come to fruition at the end of the season. But maybe this team is lying in the weeds, as Mark D'Antonio once said after upsetting Michigan. And maybe that's exactly what they need, the mindset that they need. It's going to be a tough schedule, but I think there's a few of those games. And I talked to Phil about this. I said, in your mind, what do they have to do to get up to 9 or 10 wins? Like we've seen them finish under Jim Harbaugh, quite a few times. And he said, there's a few games in there that he thinks they're going to lose close that are going to be the difference. And he said they can absolutely get up to that 9 mark if they win a couple of those toss-up type of games. Specifically, you look at maybe a Penn State on the road. I think that's going to be tough, but Penn State has their own question marks too. So that will be a winnable game, especially later on in the season if Michigan just proves that they're a little bit better than people think they are. Washington's a toss-up game. He has Washington as his number one team that's going to surprise this season. So I think he's leaning Washington on that game, but he said that's going to be kind of a toss-up. That could get you back up to the 9 mark. So 60, 40, 26, 25, whatever. I think for the first time under Jim Harbaugh, it really doesn't matter. Nobody cares about that. They just want to see Michigan at least show improvement from last season. Win 7, 8 games, make a bowl game. I don't think that's going to please anybody, but it will, maybe take some people with the pitchforks, out of the streets.
Clayton, this is what doesn't make any sense to me about the 60 ranking with the 7-5 record. So if Phil Steele was just simply saying, I like Michigan to finish 60th in the country, I would say, fine. That's an underestimation in my evaluation, but at the same time, I get it. So they must be, they play in the second best conference in America. I know that can be debated, but I think it's largely thought of second best conference in America, tough schedule, as you mentioned, a top 10 to 15 schedule in the country. So 60, okay, they're 5-7 is a Big Ten team. There's something in that range if they're going to be that low at 60.
Yeah.
If you go 8-4 in the Big Ten, if you go 8-4, period, as a Power 5, you're most likely going to be ranked. That's kind of the cutoff point. If you look at the end of the regular season, any top 25, go to any year, look at the top 25, you're going to see the end of the top 25, anywhere from about 15 to 25 loaded with Power 5 teams that are 8-4.
Right.
But that's kind of the cutoff. If you're 8-4, you're probably ranked in the Power 5. So 7-5, you're in that like 35 to 40 range. So I'm not getting how that adds up. 7-5 and number 60 in the country.
And if you win 7-8 games with that type of schedule, you're going to have a marquee win too, and that always obviously helps the rankings.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I was interested in that. I was fascinated by. I guess I should have asked him more specifically about that 60. We were talking a lot about expectations and, different, position units that he thinks are going to be good and different standout guys that are going to break out and things like that. But now that we're having this conversation, I wish will you please hammer him on the number 60 prediction when you talk to him this week?
I will. Again, it makes sense if the record was different, but it doesn't make sense with the record, at least the way I look at it. Go to any top 25 at the end of the regular season for decades. 8-4 is pretty much your cutoff.
I will be interested to hear what he says too, because Phil's obviously tremendous, outstanding at his job.
Absolutely.
And has reasoning for just about everything he puts in that huge magazine. So he will have a great answer for you. And I will be interested to hear what he has to say because he's so damn good.
For as much respect as I have of all the publications to a certain extent, I'm trying to track offensive lines, for example. And if you go to any of the other magazines and you run through, let's say their section on the offense, you get a lot of wide receivers, of course, quarterback, running backs. And then it's usually kind of like so-and-so returns 3 offensive line starters and this guy's the best guy. And it's like, okay, you got nothing there for. Phil Steele basically has put together a system where he can fit the most amount of information into the smallest space because
Crazy.
everything's got a code to it, and you just have to be able to follow along and follow the code.
Yep.
The other great point that you bring up, Clayton, that I don't know that I've ever heard anybody state except for myself, is that this deal about being ranked or unranked is, in terms of the number of teams that we rank, it's arbitrary. There's nothing magical about 25 teams. The 26th best team in the country is basically just one spot lower than the 25th team, just like the 13th team being one spot lower than the 12th team.
But so you don't see them until the fine print at the bottom when it's like, hey, they're receiving some votes too. Yeah.
So unless you're going to rank every team, I almost made it a point last year because I got into some kind of argument with somebody trying to express this point to them. It's like being a 20-game winner in Major League Baseball. There's nothing magical to 20. It's just a round number. It's like no different than being a 21-game winner or an 18-game winner, different than being a 17-game winner. It's the same thing. And to prove this point, I thought about it. I did it 1 week because I come out with the top 25 every week. I came out with the top 37. I just said 37. We're just going to rank 37 teams this week. And maybe next week we'll do 23. And then we'll do 58. And just to break people out of the thought process that there's something magical about 25 teams. It's not. It's just sounds good. That's all it is.
The only magical thing in sports about like a certain landmark, I've said that too before, where it's like, if it's somebody's 400th home run or 1,000th hit, it's like he was just as good of a player at 999 hits or whatever it is. But Ted Williams batting 400, I think, is the one that's the only real number landmark that really matters, because it's just unbelievable that he did that. But I agree with you. 26, you are a team that nobody's talking about. At 25, they're like, man, he expects them to be a top 25 team. So
they're a ranked team. They beat ranked teams.
Yeah.
And so that's another evaluation when somebody says, oh, well, they got 4 ranked wins. Okay. Let's start there. That's a good barometer. You can look at that. Of course, it means something to be ranked. There's some meaning to it. Of course, I'm not saying that there's no meaning to it. You've got to be, have a certain record and have done something to be ranked versus not ranked. But if you're the 7th ranked team in the country, well, we know you're solidly in the top 20. But if you're 24, you could be 28 and we could move up the 27 to 24. That you're just in a collection of about 15 teams. They could be anywhere depending on perspective. So there's nothing magical about it.
No, I agree.
Good stuff.
I'm with you.
Clayton Sayfie, thewolverine.com on Rivals. Please check out his work right there. Clayton, we always appreciate you dropping the knowledge on us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Can't wait for football to start, unofficial start next week.